Wonderful. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So good to see you all this evening. Tonight is the third in the four series of Judaism's three pillars that is dedicated to the memory of my nephew, Nachman Daniel ben Aryeh Tzvi, Donny Morris, of blessed memory. And tonight's topic, we'll talk a bit more about in a moment, is Torah, particularly the study of Torah. I've added another photograph here to the cover image. The middle one is of my nephew from this past year while studying in Yeshivat Shalavim, when he made just before Pesach, he made a siyum. He completed the study of a tractate of Talmud, and he was the one who led the siyum on the day before Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, which is the fast of the firstborns. My nephew was firstborn, and so he would have had to fast. So he made the siyum himself, we actually didn't know he was doing that until someone sent the family the photo of him doing it. So we're very proud of his study, and maybe I'll circle back to that at the very end of tonight's subject. And these are all areas, and the reason that we've chosen this, that all of these different areas were areas that he really excelled in, and so he thought particularly though this past year, as he was in yeshiva, a major focus was, of course, on Talmud Torah, was on the study of Torah. So in a sense, tonight's class is perhaps the most contemporary to Donny's life. All the topics, though, they all certainly applied to him. So let's just go into the first source. This has been our first source each class, because it really lays the foundation for the topic. And this is from Pirke Abot. It's the second of the teachings in Ethics of Our Fathers. And there we were taught that Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous, who is really the transition point between the time of the prophets and the time of the sages, said that the world stands on three things. This is famous, and he said Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Torah, worship, and acts of kindness. We've gone a bit out of order. Last week I started with worship, and next week we will focus on acts of kindness. Though for tonight's topic, we're going to spend some time studying a bit more about Torah, about the notion of Talmud Torah, the study of Torah. What value do we place in it within Judaism, right? What role does the study of Torah actually play within our tradition, and how are we meant to kind of relate to it? What are the when we certain mitzvot, we have kind of a sense of a clearly defined sense of what one has to do. How one fulfills those mitzvot, how one aspires to do them. So you think of sounding the shofar. Okay, we know we do that in Rosh Hashanah. We have a certain amount of money that one should give each year to charity. So when it comes to Torah study, it's a mitzvah. We'll talk a little bit about it. So what is the what exactly are the is its place within a Jewish person's life? And certainly it's one which is very important if it's been placed here among the three things that a person should do. And it's interesting, I think in different Jewish communities, different aspects of these three things are perhaps focused on to a larger extent. And certainly in some communities, Torah is given, incredible amount of attention. I would say in other communities, tefillah, prayer, is really made, the most important focus. And other communities, you find chasadim, that acts of kindness are given, the most time is put into them. And obviously, ultimately, a person should be devoting time to all of these things, as we've been talking about, to kind of be a well-rounded Jew. But certainly, Torah is an important part. And obviously, if a person's Jewish life contains acts of kindness and prayer, but not Torah study, right? There's something which is missing, like we said in the first class in the introduction, right? That there is the element of serving God with one's heart through prayer, through one's body, through acts of kindness, and also through one's mind, through the study of Torah. And so if one does only one or two of those things, not the other, there's an entire aspect of the human condition which is being held back. And perhaps if we were to identify any of those things as being, particularly human, it is our mind, right? It's our ability to think, which makes us uniquely human. So it's not surprising that should be one which is placed on such a pedestal, because it's the thing that we can uniquely do as humans, of course, is be able to study and understand. So let's take a look. We're going to look a little bit at a couple different sources that talk about the mitzvah of Torah study and its value and how one goes about actually doing it. So let's move on to the next source. So this is the source that we also looked at last week. This is from the prayer book. And in it, it has a startling statement. It says that these are the precepts, the fruits of which a man enjoys in this world, while the principal reward is preserved for him in the world to come. They are honoring father and mother, performing deeds of kindness, early attendance in the house of study morning and evening. Perhaps we'll refer back to that one in a bit, the house of study morning and evening. So keep that in mind. Providing hospitality to guests, visiting the sick, participating in making a wedding, accompanying the dead to the grave, concentrating on the meanings of prayer, making peace between fellow man and between husband and wife, right? So all of these aspects that we say, Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim, you find them all in here, but with a bit more detail. But then it concludes, and the study of Torah is equal to them all. And then it kind of puts on the pedestal Torah, which seems to be saying that all those things on one side and Torah study on the other side, and it's equal to all of those things. So this rabbinic teaching certainly places a huge value on Talmud Torah, on Torah study, right? That it even says that it's Keneged Kulam, right? That it is as weighty as all of them. And so the question that we're going to begin tonight's presentation with is, what is it about the study of Torah that should make it as weighty as all these other incredibly important and precious good deeds? That we would say that Torah actually has value equal to them all. It seems almost implausible, right? That should be the case, that one's study of something should be as valuable as doing all of these incredibly important mitzvot. And so this was not a question that only kind of we came up with in modern times. The Talmud itself already explores this issue about the value that is placed on Torah, the study of Torah, and how that compares, in a sense, to the value of other mitzvot. And surely it becomes a bit of a academic exercise, because one is obligated to do all the mitzvot. It doesn't matter which ones you think are more important or less important. Sometimes we have situations where if you only have time for one, which one do you do first? So there are some practical ramifications, but mostly speaking, one has to do all the mitzvot. Ultimately you do them all. So the question of which is more important or which is more weighty is a bit of a value question, but maybe not with so many practical implications. But be that as it may, we know that what things that we value more, we do end up putting more emphasis on, and we do spend more time on. And so it is an important question of, how does one think about these 613 commandments, these three categories of worship of God, right? And to say that Torah is equal to them all, what exactly do we mean by that? And so there's a well-known teaching about this question, and that's the subject of our next source. And this is found in the Babylonian Talmud, in the Tractate of Kiddushin, page 48. And it says the following. It says, and there already was an incident in which Rabbi Tarfon and the elders were reclining in the loft of the house of Nitza in Lod. I'll just begin by saying this introduction to the statement, oftentimes the Talmud will just say, so-and-so said something. This one actually seems to be setting a bit of a tone for this, because it's talking about that they were in the loft in the house of Lod. I'm curious if that reminds anybody of any other rabbinic teaching that they may have.
Yes, it's about in the Haggadah, about the four Rabbonim who were reclining.
Reclining where?
Where they were in Bnei Barak. They were in Bnei Barak. And that is
right.
Lod. That is Lod. I was thinking about that as well, yeah.
So thank you, Flora. So that's exactly it. So this idea, and there's a question about the exact timing of these stories, but this idea that they may be in the loft of the house, kind of raises some eyebrows about, why are they in the loft? So some say this may have happened during times of Roman persecutions. And so they may have been, in a sense, hiding out in these spaces. In order, perhaps hiding out even in the times of celebrating the Passover Haggadah, and that in fact these groups are meeting clandestinely, perhaps at a time when it's prohibited, perhaps a time when people are trying to find the elders of Israel, and so they're gathered together. And you would imagine if they're meeting and talking about something that would seem to indicate that the subject matter is of incredible importance, and that they kind of had to discuss this issue, even if it meant meeting in secret. And so it says, this question was asked of them. And so the question was posed, is study greater or is action greater, right? Which is more valuable? Which is more, right? Talmud gadol or maaseh gadol, right? Which is greater, study or action? Rabbi Tarfon answered and said, action is greater, right? Doing mitzvot is greater than studying about mitzvot. Rabbi Akiva answered and said, no, study is greater, right? It's more important to study the Torah than perhaps to, right? It seems to be what he's saying, that it is even greater than doing the Torah. Everyone answered and said, study is greater, for study leads to action. And so here you have this somewhat confusing kind of final comment, which says, Gadol, Talmud Gadol, Shehat Talmud Mevi Leidei Maaseh. That says that why is it that study is greater? Not because study is greater, but because study brings one to action. So which is greater, study or action? It would seem to be what it's saying is that action is greater, but it's putting the focus on study, because if a person studies, then one acts, right? We say that, if you're ignorant, you can't do the mitzvot, right? We say en am haaretz chasid, right? The ignorant person can't be the pious one, right? You have to know what the rules are, you have to know what the values are, you have to know what the traditions are, if you are then going to actually carry them out, if you're going to actually fulfill them, right? And so there's this idea, right, that in that sense, study is greater, because you need to in order to do, you need to study so that you know what it is that you're supposed to do, so that you know what the values are, so you know where the focus should be. And so it seems that ultimately what they're saying, it's true that that action is more important, but we need to study in order to do that. And it could be that it had a bit of a discussion around where they put their efforts, right? They're going to have to try and save the Jewish community. They're going to have to try to save Judaism, right, at times of the destruction. And so the question is where should they put their efforts, right? Should they put their efforts perhaps on practical things, or perhaps on setting up a seminary, right, a place of Torah study? And it seems that may be what it was that they were discussing. And I think what they said is you have to create a school. A school is the most important thing. The most important thing a Jewish community can have. More than a synagogue, more than a cemetery, is a school, because a school is where you educate, is where you teach your children, right, and prepare them for ultimately living a Jewish life. And if you have educated children, there will be a synagogue, and there will be a cemetery, and there will be all the things that you need to have, right? Because it's through study, through knowledge, through awareness that ultimately a person will come to then live, to fulfill the teachings of the Torah. So it could be that when we say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, right, that when we say that the study of Torah is, on the same par as all those other ones, it could be what it means is saying that it is just so vital. It's not that it is more important in of itself to the other mitzvot, but that it is just such a fundamentally important thing to do that we consider it, to kind of be on par, as weighty as all those other things, because it is through the study of Torah that one will hopefully be propelled to do all of those other things. And so in that sense, it is of great value. Of course, the caveat to all of this is, of course, that when a person studies, they are having in mind learning from what they study how they're going to act, right? If they study in a way which is purely academic, or if they study in a way which is callous, then ultimately they can be a great Talmid Chacham, as it were, a great scholar, but ultimately not be a tzaddik, right? Not actually live a righteous life, right? A person perhaps has to bear that in mind when they study, that they should make sure that the things that they're studying are inspiring them to improve their behaviors, to improve their relationship with God, improve the way that they relate to other people, and so forth, right? It can't be something that, in a sense, remains in the books. Person has to be aware that the whole point is to learn in order to do. And so perhaps that's partly what they're saying here as well, is saying that yes, you should study, but make sure when you study that you know that the ultimate goal is action. That it's not meant to, in a sense, remain, in the study hall. It has to then translate into the way that you conduct yourself and relate to other people and treat other people, and the way you worship God and so forth, as well. In fact, there's a teaching in the Talmud that says that there's nothing worse than a Torah scholar who is not a good person. I mean, that's like the word. Better the person should know nothing and be a bad person, or than know a lot and be. I mean, that's just the worst of it all. So we certainly say a person should become a great scholar, but you have to do it with the intent to also then become a great person as well. Okay. Does anybody have any comments so far? If not, I'm keen to keep moving.
One comment from me. It's
Yes.
a shame that some of the participants in the Israeli Knesset from the far right groups didn't listen to some of these important tractates that have been said over many generations in the way that they behaved over the last few weeks. I don't need to say any more.
Thank you, David. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, great. Okay, so let's carry on.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute just to say quickly that thank you for that beautiful explanation. Later on, you have all the various things in Pirke Abot, those people who learn but don't do, those people who do and don't learn, those who don't either do either. So, it's interesting, just all the beautiful answers that we get from that. Yeah. So they're both really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Flora. Okay, so let's move on to the next source, because the question that we now have is, what is the obligation, right? We've said that Torah study is important, right? It's so important. It's as valuable as everything else. Torah leads to action. So fantastic. But when it comes to mitzvot, we tend to have a rubric, right? A formula for it. So what's involved in this mitzvah of studying Torah? And so one of the important sources within this discussion in the Talmud is a verse from the opening chapter of the book of Joshua. So Yehoshua has just been appointed as the leader following the death of Moshe, and God has told him, make sure that you fulfill the laws of the Torah, make sure the people follow the Torah. And then it says in verse 8, let not this book of the teachings, the book of the Torah, cease from your lips. Lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha, but recite it day and night. V'higita bo yomam v'layla, so that you may observe faithfully all that is written in it, right? This idea, right? In order that you shall do, right? Study so that you should do. That's exactly the idea that we just saw. Only then will you prosper in your undertakings, and only then will you be successful, right? So this idea that, this for the Jewish community, this is the foundation, right? That is from the Torah that we will ultimately find success. And so there is a question about this verse, because this verse seems to contain a contradiction. It says, Lo yamush sefer haTorah zempicha, let not the words of the Torah cease from your lips, right? Don't let the words of the Torah ever cease from your lips. And then the next part says, and you shall recite it day and night, and you should dwell on it day and night, which seems to perhaps say, is that the same thing? Is that saying something different, right? Don't let it cease. Study it day and night. Is that the same? Is that different? Is it teaching us something? What exactly is God trying to communicate to Yeshua, and then ultimately to all of us, right, through this verse? And so there's a long discussion about this verse in the Talmud, trying to understand it, but ultimately using this as a basis for understanding what exactly is the obligation, right? What is the mitzvah in relation to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, of studying Torah. And so this is a longer source that I'd like to look at with you. So this is from the tractate of Menachot that deals with sacrifices, the mincha. And so while it's a bit of a longer source, I didn't include the original text here. I figured I'd just do this English translation so that we could get it onto one page. And there's different paragraphs, so we'll kind of pause and look at each of them. And so it starts out in the following way. Rabbi Ami said, we learn from the words of Rabbi Yossi that even if a person studies only one chapter in the morning and one chapter in the evening, he fulfills the mitzvah of the book of the Torah shall not depart out of your mouth, right? So this idea that how does one fulfill, right? Practically speaking, how can you make it that the words of Torah never cease from your mouth? I mean, you have to use your mouth for other things also, right? So practically speaking, you can't make it that your words of Torah never cease from your mouth. So he said, no, don't worry, it's okay. As long as you study, right, one chapter in the morning, one chapter in the evening, you have fulfilled this notion of let it not depart from your mouth. In other words, when the second part of the verse says, you shall dwell on it day and night, what it means is you shall dwell on it at some point during the day, and you shall dwell on it at some point during the night. But that fundamentally, one doesn't need to study Torah all day, but one does have to study Torah every day. At some point during the daytime and some point during the nighttime, right? That is the, shall we say, the technical obligation, as it were, is to devote some of your day and some of your night every day to the study of Torah. Then we have a somewhat, at first glance, shocking statement. We'll see the Talmud thinks that we should put a hush on this one. So it says, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right, the famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, even if a person reads only the Shema in the morning and in the evening, he fulfills this book of the Torah shall not depart. But one may not say this in the presence of ignorant people. So here it says, right, that we know that there is a mitzvah to say Shema in the night and evening, right? That's based on the verse in Shema where we say, B'shoch b'cha uvkumecha, when you lie down and when you rise up. And so we know there's a mitzvah to recite the Shema each day and night. And what he's saying over here is that when one recites the Shema at night and day, when they wake up, you already have fulfilled the mitzvah of studying the Torah at least once during the day and once at night. And the reason for this is that when you read the Shema is not prayer. The Shema is the mitzvah of the Shema is you shall recite these words. So when we recite the Shema, one is not praying to God, one is reciting, one is learning, one is studying God's teachings. Right? We recite this text in the evening and we recite this text in the evening in order to remind us, to learn from it all these important lessons. And we've referred to the Shema in previous lectures. There's lots of important ideas in the paragraphs of the Shema. And so ultimately he says, if you actually do that, you fulfill your mitzvah. But then he says, but don't tell anyone that, because we don't want people to only read the Shema and say, oh, Rabbi, I did my obligation. I don't need to go to your classes. That's enough, right? So he says, don't tell people that, even though it's true. Amazingly, the paragraph concludes. It says, and Rava said, it's a mitzvah to say this in the presence of ignorant people. You should actually tell people this, because the problem is that let people know that yes, with the action that they do by saying Shema, they fulfilled the mitzvah. Let them be proud. Let them know that they have in fact done what God asked. The fact that you'd like them to do even more, okay, that's your job. Inspire them to do more. But we should be honest with people. We should let people know. We should make sure that they are informed. And in fact, yes, when they recite the Shema, they fulfill the mitzvah of the study of Torah. And perhaps maybe some people who are lazy and don't say the Shema twice a day will now make sure to do it, because they know not only are they reciting the Shema, they're also fulfilling the mitzvah of studying the Torah day and night. So parenthetically, this is a very important teaching, because in general, there is a discussion when it comes to the teaching of halakha, whether one should teach leniencies to the public. And the debate basically goes around this idea of, leniencies are not the ideal. So if you, in a sense, teach people about leniencies, they'll say, okay, I'm just going to do that, right? We don't necessarily want that attitude. On the other hand, if it's a leniency, good, let people do that. At least they're fulfilling the mitzvah, to that extent, even if there's a better way to do it as well, right? And it seems that that's how the Talmud concludes, because it concludes with Rava's teaching that yes, if this is the Torah, teach it to people. Everyone has the right to know what the Torah says, and ultimately to make their own choices. And so the point is, when it comes to the study of Torah, yes, you can fulfill it by studying once during the day, once at night, and you can even do that by reciting the Shema. Fine. But that's not the end of the discussion. There's some great teachings in here. So let's just carry on with what it says. It says, Bendama, the son of Rabbi Yishmael's sister, asked Rabbi Yishmael. So the question was asked of Rabbi Yishmael from his nephew. Somebody like me who has studied the entire Torah. So he says, listen, I've been yeshiva my whole life. I've done it. I know plenty of Torah. So he says, someone like me, is he permitted to study Greek wisdom? Meaning, can I go to university, right? Can I go study philosophy? Can I go study other things? I've done my job. I've studied the Torah. So he answered, apply to him the verse, this book of the Torah shall not depart of your mouth, and you shall meditate on it day and night. He says, the verse says study day and night. So he says, sure, go out and find a time that is neither day or night, and study then Greek wisdom. So he gives him a bit of a tongue-in-cheek answer where he says, sure, you can study other things. Whenever it's not day or night, go for it. So obviously Rabbi Shmuel was understanding the verse of day and night, not as once during the day, once at night. He understood it to mean that it is all day and all night, meaning as much as you possibly can study the Torah, you should do it, and even to the exclusion of other things. So that was one particular view, right? And that perhaps the idea is, Torah only, that's a person's education should consist only of Torah. But once again, the Talmud does not conclude there. That does not seem to be the conclusion of the Talmud, because the next paragraph says the following. It says, he argues with Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Right? So meaning this, what Rabbi Shmuel just says indicates that he actually disagreed with the teaching of Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. For Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman said in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, the verse is neither an obligation nor a mitzvah, but rather a blessing. The Holy One, blessed be, talking about the verse in Joshua, the Holy One, blessed be he, saw in Yehoshua that the words of the Torah are exceedingly dear to him. As it is stated, it quotes a verse from the Torah, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tent, right? So it refers to the verse in Shemot that says that Joshua was always in the tent. And of course, in rabbinic tradition, the tent means the study hall, right? You find a similar understanding when it comes to Jacob, that it also refers to him, Ish Tam Yoshev Oalim, that he was a simple person, a tent dweller. And there too, the rabbis interpret what does it mean that he studied in the tent, that he studied in the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever, right? That he studied in the seminary of his age. And so the same idea here, that Joshua, he studied Torah. He delved into the study of Torah. That's where his main focus was. So he says, what does it mean when God tells him, you shall study the Torah day and night, don't let it depart? That wasn't commanding Joshua. It was blessing Joshua. It was blessing Joshua. Joshua, may you be blessed, right? He says, the Holy One, blessed be he, right? Reading the final sentence, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, Yehoshua, the words of the Torah are so dear to you. This book of the Torah shall not depart out of your mouth. Right? And so it was a blessing to Joshua to say, Joshua, I know you love the Torah. May you merit to, not have it depart from your mouth. May you study the Torah day and night, right? So he was giving Joshua a blessing, essentially saying, I know you have to do all these things now. You've got to go and conquer the land and so forth, but may you be blessed to ultimately have your lot in the Bet Midrash, right? In the study hall. But ultimately, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, is saying that this is not a commandment. It's not a command. You have to study Torah all day and all night. It's like an ideal. It's beautiful. It's what a wonderful life where you can just study all day long. People, they never graduate. They're always in university. Like it's a nice idea, right? May you be blessed to do that, but that's not what you have to do. That's not what most people are going to do. Like most people are going to study other things. Most people are going to get jobs. Most people are going to have other careers, but we should all merit to have it. So what it seems that this teaching in the Talmud is actually kind of concluding on is saying that, yes, we have this ideal of the study of Torah. One should be blessed to study Torah all day long, but on a basic level, you fulfill your obligation, as it were, once during the day, once at night. And you can even do it by shall we say, simply reciting the Shema. But obviously, what the Talmud is also getting at by saying that it was a blessing to Joshua is saying that obviously one should aspire to study even more, right? That there is a level that goes even beyond this amount, and a person should, in a sense, aspire not to do the bare minimum, as it were, but ultimately to do more. And just Joshua loved it. It's how he would have preferred to spend his time. We should all be cultivating ourselves to love the study of Torah so much that we look for opportunities to study it more. At the bare minimum, once during the day, once at night, but ideally, we should look for more opportunities to study. And so then this kind of leads us, therefore, to our next point. That the study of Torah is, in that sense, not fixed. I mean, it's fixed in the sense that you should have some time during the day, some time at night, but then ultimately there is, as they say, the more the merrier, as it goes. And we'll get back to, in a sense, what that means when we say the more the merrier. Meaning, what do we even mean when we say study Torah? Does that mean studying the 5 books of Moses? What is that phrase even refer to? But just before we get to that, I want to look at one final source with you. And this source is also found in the Talmud. This is in the Tractate of Shabbat. And it says the following, and this is a very famous, it's a beautiful teaching. This is a teaching everyone should know. This is a really special lesson. So this is Rava. So the famous Abaye and Rava, 2 very important teachers in the Talmud. So Rava said the following. It says, Rava said, after departing from this world, when a person is brought to judgment for the life he lived in this world, they say to him the order of that verse. So basically, when you die and you will go to heaven, a series of questions will be posed to you. Did you conduct business faithfully? Interestingly, that's the first one. Were you honest in your business dealings? Number 2, and we'll get back to this more in a second, did you designate times for Torah study? In the Hebrew, kavata itim la Torah. Did you designate fixed times for study? Furthermore, did you engage in procreation, right? Did you have children? Did you await salvation, right? Did you look forward to the Messiah, right, as a value? Did you engage in the dialectics of wisdom or understanding one matter from another? Did you delve your mind into the study of wisdom? And nevertheless, beyond all of these, if the fear of the Lord is his treasure, yes, he is worthy. And if not, no, none of these accomplishments have any value, right? And so it concludes with this idea that at the end of the day, were you a yirat shamayim, right? Were you a person that feared God? And ultimately, if you didn't do any of these things, but you feared God, okay, you still get to walk through the gate. And if you did all these things and you didn't fear God, none of it matters because you didn't fear God, right? And so this seems to be picking up on a verse in Tanakh. Does anybody know what verse this is probably picking up on? Flora.
I'm writing something down. Sorry, what was your question? Which verse does what pin on?
The final statement, right? That
the verse in the Torah. In the Torah.
Not in the Torah. Not in the Torah. In all of Tanakh, there's a verse.
Kohelet. Hasof hadavar hashem nishma.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Good. Flora is our class scholar. Correct, Flora. It says Sof davar kol nishma delokim yirav et mitzvotav shemor. Right after the whole Ecclesiastes, right after he says that, vanity of vanities, nothing matters. We're all going to die. What does it matter? He says, end of the day, fear of God, right, and doing the mitzvot. That's what it all comes down to. So it seems to be that's what we're saying. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Are you a fearer of heaven? Right. That is such a basic idea. And you can do it. You can do all the mitzvot in the world. If you don't fear heaven, what's it worth? Right. And if you don't do the mitzvot, but you fear heaven, okay, at least you're a person who feared God. And so it's an amazing list. There's a lot you can talk about within this list, the things that are included in this, what does it say about values and how a person spends their time and so forth. But what's interesting for our purposes is the second one, right, which says kavata itim la Torah. Did you designate time for Torah? And it seems to be from this point that it's saying, not did you study Torah, did you designate time for it? And so it seems to be taking this a bit further and saying that when it comes to the study of Torah, the point is that it should be something which is prioritized. It should be something which is fixed. If it's something you simply do when the moment calls you to do it, you haven't prioritized it properly, right? But anything that's important to you that you put into your diary, right, that you schedule and say, this is when I'm doing this, right? That's how you show that something is incredibly important to you. And so what it's saying is, when it comes to coming to heaven, right, the question is how valuable was Torah study to you? Was it valuable enough that you even designated time for it? And so that seems to be a value when it comes to Torah study. We know that there's already this notion of day and night. And so it's this idea that it should be fixed, right? That there should be designated times when you do this, not just any time during the day, any time at night, but kind of taking it further and saying, choose a specific time. Do you say, the 10 minutes before I go to bed, I'm going to open up a Jewish book and I'm going to read it. You know what? When I wake up in the morning, when I finish my prayers, I'm going to open up a book for 10 minutes and read it, right? Am I going, right? Will it be during your lunch break, right? Will you have fixed time to say, every day I am going to have a specific time when I study, and, that's simply part of my calendar, right? And that is a value. That is what something should aspire to. And so what I'd like to do as a way of kind of wrapping up what we've been sharing is to show you a very precious schedule for the study of Torah that my nephew had made. And so I'm going to bring this up to show all of you, and we can kind of, we'll talk a little bit about it because it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So on the right over here is my nephew when he did his siyum, when he completed the study. You can see behind him the plastic over there. They'd split rooms into different areas because of COVID. So he was with his pod, or whatever they called it, doing this. And on the left over here was his schedule. So this was a schedule that he made for his time in yeshiva. It got a bit, some colors got on it, so it's a bit difficult to read. But if you look at it, there's columns for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbat as well. And then on the left side are all the times of the day, starting at 8 in the morning, right, going till after 10 o'clock at night. So he was spending a lot of time in the Beit Midrash, as he should have done being in yeshiva. And it's a wonderful thing because he really set times for when he was going to study. And, you can see how he really was doing his best to make the most of every part of the day, that he would know, I'm now got to do this. I now have to do that. I now have to do the next thing. And it would keep him on schedule with what it was that he wanted to accomplish. And if you take a very close look at it, you'll see he had a very ambitious goals within his studies. As you would expect in yeshiva, there's significant amounts of time dedicated to the study of Talmud, but both studying the Talmud in depth and also doing what's known as Daffy Me, studying a page of the Talmud every day, so that over 7 years you can complete the entire study of Talmud. We didn't know he was doing that. It was something he was just doing without telling the rest of the family. But something that he wanted to do. My brother studies Daf Yomi, so perhaps he got inspired from my brother to do that. But then in addition to those things, if you look closely, it has a study of Mishnah, it has the study of Tanakh, other works, the laws of Shabbat and so forth. And so he really had so many different areas of Torah that he was studying. And then the truth is, that's correct. When it comes to the study of Torah, it's not like we don't mean specifically the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. It means the wisdom of the Torah, right? The teachings of the Torah. So whether that's works of halakha, works of law, works of Jewish philosophy, whether it's studying the Talmud, whether it's studying obviously the Hebrew Bible, right? All of those things are included in that idea. And I think what I love about what he did, and he's inspired me to take on this as well, is that, a lot of times these things seem daunting, but if you actually break them down, you can actually do it. If a person studies one chapter of Mishnah a day. In 2 years, you study, I think it's 2 years, you study all of the Mishnayot. If a person studies one chapter of prophets and writings a day, you study all of Tanakh also within like 2 years. These are things you can take 10 minutes a day to do. And if you do that in 2 years, you'll finish all of Tanakh, and that's an amazing thing. How many Jews have studied all of Tanakh? I would say not too many, but you only need 10, 15 minutes and 20 minutes a day and do one chapter, and in 2 years, you'll have studied the whole thing. You'll know what the whole Tanakh actually says. And that's true of Mishnayot, that's true of Talmud. If you want to take the writings of the Rambam, he has on here the Mishneh Torah as well. He was studying Rambam every day as well to study all the Rambam's magnificent work, the Mishneh Torah. And the point is, he obviously had his whole day in yeshiva to do this, so he was able to do all of them. Maybe we could do all of these things at once, but you know what? You could do one of them. Perhaps your study during the day could be one, maybe your study in the evening could be the other. Without a lot of time, you could actually become, in very short order, a big Torah scholar. We said earlier in the class, the question of what's greater, study or action. We quoted Rabbi Akiva, who said study is, right? And we understood that he meant by study that perhaps study that leads to action. Rabbi Akiva is the best example of this, because according to the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva was complete ignorant. He knew nothing of Judaism. He grew up with zero Jewish education, and was only after he married his wife and she encouraged him to go and study that he went and he studied. And lo and behold, after a number of years, not only was he a scholar, he was the greatest scholar. There's even a story in the Talmud that says that God told that Moshe Rabbeinu had a prophecy that one day someone would come along, Rabbi Akiva, who'd be even greater than he was. And the Talmud says he didn't start till he was 40 years old. It was only at 40 years old that he began to study. So, it's like, there's no excuse. Rabbi Akiva could do it. We all could do it. And the point is, how do you do it? It seems so daunting. You take a bit, you have a fixed time every day, and bit by bit, within a few years, you can be a scholar. And you know what? All of these things are translated now into English. You can get these things, easily get them on the internet. You can buy a book. It's super easy. Okay, if you don't know the Hebrew, the Aramaic, it's fine. Read them in English. That's, whatever you can do is great. The point is, set a time, and commit yourself to it, and then you can accomplish great things. I'll just point out over here, because this is a great part of this. I'm not sure if this is making it big on your screen or only on my screen, but on Thursday night, if you look down the column towards the end of the column, there's a little thing there that says call grandma. So he had it in his calendar to each week to call my mom. She misses that call greatly. But amongst all his learning, all his time in yeshiva, he still had time to call his grandmother. So that's Talmud Torah maybe lidei masa. Torah learning that brings to action. A person becomes a great Torah scholar, but is an even greater person. That's a great example of that. And we're going to focus next week on becoming that great person, doing acts of kindness. But my nephew was definitely doing a great job when it came to Torah. He really was doing a wonderful job with his learning, obviously devoting his entire day to it, setting times, making sure he wasn't just learning, but was learning things that was on a schedule so that he would be accomplishing things in his learning as well. You can sometimes meet people who study in yeshiva. You ask them what they've studied. Not so much, because they study the same page of Talmud over and over and over again, and they don't actually, that's good too. Go into depth, but you also need to be accomplishing things in your learning as well. I finished this tractate. I finished that book of the Bible. I finished that teaching of the, you have to accomplish things in your learning as well. And I think that's that element of kavata itim la Torah. Did you set time for Torah? Is that also was your learning organized? So there wasn't haphazard, but you actually had something you were hoping to accomplish along the way. And so what I'd like everyone to take away from today's class is this idea that the study of Torah is not something which is meant to simply be amorphous, right? Just, Torah study. No, day and night, fixed times, things you hope to accomplish, progress, right? And ultimately, to always be paying attention when you're learning for how it can inspire you in your actions as well, whether that's in the observance of other mitzvot or being a better person and so forth, right? One's learning should always be inspiring them to become better as well, so that it's a constant kind of hill that you're climbing. You study, you become better. You study more, you become better, and it keeps growing on one another. So, something that has been amazing about my nephew is obviously the tragedy of his passing. He clearly was on a path to great heights, and we're very sorry to not see that place that he would achieve. In fact, we didn't even know that he was on. I mean, this is really something he was doing, humbly, something that he was just doing. Perhaps when he came back from studying yeshiva, we would have found out. But it was just simply something he was getting on with. But this schedule that he wrote has made its rounds on social media, and has been inspiring a lot of people to make their own schedules, to fix their own time for Torah learning. And it's a very special object. This schedule was found at his table in yeshiva, and his rabbi gave it to my brother and sister-in-law, so that they have it now. And during the shiva, a Hasidic Rebbe came to visit them, and he had heard about the schedule, so they showed it to him. And just before he was about to leave, he kissed it, like treating it. This was a holy object also, and and I thought it was just beautiful, how making a schedule, you can turn that schedule becomes something holy. If it's something which is you're using to inspire you to greater heights, then everything can become Torah, right? Everything can become something which is kadosh, something which is holy as well. So I hope that my nephew's life and this class should inspire all of us to hopefully go from, as they say, Michael El Chayil, from height to height within our own aspirations, within our own studies of Torah as well. And we'll conclude here for tonight's class, and next week we'll study the last of the three, the Gemilut Chasadim, the acts of kindness. Before we sign off, though, does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, Rabbi Morris, but it is incredibly inspiring what you showed us of your nephew tonight. It's as inspiring as, the greatest speakers that could speak on it, just to look at what he did so young.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you very much. I would agree.
I also have a comment that you said that he did the siyum on the fast of the firstborn. The point being that when they do a siyum, they have a suda and they don't fast.
That's right. Exactly. Right. That's exactly right. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. It was really very, very moving, Rabbi Morris. So moving, it brings me to tears, because it's such a loss. But Hashem has his ways. I'm just an ordinary student of yours, and I still think of him every day, and I think of his parents and his family, and I think of you and your wife and how you're coping with it. It's a great, great loss. And I've had many great losses in my life. I've lost two young brothers. I'm one of a large family, but I think you're amazing and so inspirational. And I want to thank you very, very much. And I hope Hashem will bless his parents, give them a lot of nechama, a lot of distractions, a lot of smachot in the coming years, that they will be able to bear this loss.
Thank you, Flora. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
I think I fully agree with Flora. We wish all the family all the best. It must be a very difficult time, but take the memory positively. And I think this idea of learning a little bit each day, I think it's very important. I mean, clearly we're coming to classes now, but just doing something small, even 10 minutes a day, I think is an important message that people can put into their schedules.
Absolutely. And I would encourage everyone to do that. If you haven't studied Tanakh yet, start with the beginning of Joshua, one chapter a day in English. It'll be amazing. You'll just be finishing book after book after book, every month, and there'll be a great feeling of accomplishment from that. Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Rabbi, that's been
Have a
very,
good
very,
rest
very good, very inspiring, actually. Thank you.
Thank you so Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep well and
Oh, amazing. What an
Take care. See
amazing
you.
young